All right. Good afternoon, Chair Postman, board members, and staff. The lobby is open and recording has begun.
Thank you, Dustin. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll call to order the Executive Management Team meeting of the Liquor and Cannabis Board for January 12th, 2021. The first item on our agenda is an executive session for our semi-annual litigation review, and we'll do that now. We'll be discussing legal counsel matters relating to litigation or potential litigation to which the agency is or is likely to become a party. I expect this executive session will last till 1:30, and so what we'll do is obviously the meeting feed will stay on. We will go into a breakout group for the executive session, come back at 1:30. If the meeting goes longer than 1:30, I'll be back by 1:30 to extend the executive session. If it ends sooner than that.
Sorry, David, it is 1:30 right now.
You're right. I don't know why it says conclude at 1:30. It's not going to conclude at 1:30. I think we're saying 2 o'clock. We're given 30 minutes for this, I believe. Yes. So move all those times. Thank you, Bruce. The agenda has it right. My note is not, so my bad. We're going into a 30-minute executive session. At the end of the 30 minutes, I'll either come back to extend it or we'll reconvene the meeting. If we finish early, we still will be at ease until 2 o'clock. So that is, and with that, we will go into executive session.
Good afternoon to those of you that have tuned in to the executive management team meeting for January 12th. Jim Morgan, I do see that you've joined us. Thank you for being here. This is Dustin Dixon, executive assistant to the board, speaking on behalf of Chair Postman, board members Garrett and Hauge. The board is extending their executive session by 15 minutes and now anticipates rejoining the meeting at 2:15. Thank you.
We will be at ease till 2:15, and then we'll reconvene and continue on the agenda. Thanks for your patience. Okay, it's 2:15. We'll reconvene the executive management team meeting for January 12th and go back to our agenda, which the next item up is approval of the December 8th, 2021 executive management team meeting minutes. Member Garrett, motion.
This is Holly. I move approval of the December 8th EMT meeting minutes.
Great, and I will second, and those are approved. Thank you. Now we're going to move into our staff reports and updates, and we will start with our CFO, James Morgan, for an update on the Cannabis Central Reporting System. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Hauge. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on this important project. When we last met, we had just barely gone live a couple of days before that. Since then, we've made steady progress in stabilizing the system. Early on, for the first several weeks, we had an incident command team of technical folks, program folks, that met daily to discuss issues with the system and solutions to that. The service desk to date has fielded about 1,000 questions and tickets and has closed almost all of those by now. Those tickets ranged from folks having difficulty accessing the system. Those were pretty prevalent early on, and they were able to help people through those. Some had issues that were specific just to that licensee, and those folks were helped. And some were related to the system in general. Of those issues related to the system, those were triaged and categorized based on their severity. The most severe were issues that we determined needed to be fixed right away. In the IT parlance, they call that a hot fix. There were 5 of those total so far. Only one since the week before Christmas, so a few early on. Each of those was the fix was implemented without any downtime to the system. There are no level 2 severity issues remaining on the list right now. Others were determined that that there was either a workaround or an acceptable that they could be accepted and put on hold to work as a group. The team is now working on those system issues, and we expect a group of those to be implemented in the first week of February. At the end of December came the decommissioning of the Leaf data system. We did receive our final download of the database by the end of the year, and have that data set available for our continued use and reporting and analysis. So we are complete and no longer have a contractual relationship with MJ Freeway. Our focus right now, as I mentioned, is on the issues that have been identified. The team is evaluating those and working on a complete set of fixes. The next step after that kind of stabilization update to the system will be turning our attention on the manifest issue. That's something that I've mentioned a couple of times. That system is working. However, it's very inefficient for licensees, and we have committed to finding a better way to do that. Part of that process will be to engage stakeholders in the industry. We're going through lists of licensees and integrators who are using the system right now to determine which of those we'll be inviting to participate with us as we explore solutions to improving the manifest problem. We expect to be reaching out to those stakeholders in the first week of February, and then the next several weeks after that, have a meeting scheduled to do some woodshedding with them and come up with some solutions to that system. At this point, we have had close to 80% of our licensees have at least logged into the system. Not quite so many have actually uploaded files yet, but most of our licensees are we know they're at least aware of the system and their responsibility to engage with the system and report in the system. The Enforcement Division, the Enforcement and Education Division, with emphasis on education, is using the list of those folks that have not yet logged in to provide education and make sure that expectations for licensees, that licensees are clear on what's expected of them, and also pointing them in direction of resources if they have questions or concerns or issues with being able to report. It will be we will be in an education mode for at least a couple of months, with our focus on ensuring that licensees have the tools they need to be able to access the system. We are setting our sights on what this project looks like to transition to a system that is just supported by our IT operation. Sometime after the manifest solution is implemented, we're likely to be transitioning the project to a maintenance phase where potential updates to the system are evaluated through our internal governance processes. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Did you have so you said we're at 80% now, participation?
Correct.
Yeah. Is that what we thought we'd be at? Like, any way to judge that?
That's kind of where I thought it's a basic 80-20 rule is playing out here, where our regular communications and we've taken several different avenues to try to communicate with the industry, from emails, websites, webinars, postcards, through trade associations. That's probably as far as we're going to get through those normal communications channels. And now the individual outreach is where that 80% of the effort is going to come in with those 20% of the licensees. Yeah.
Well, you're our numbers guys, so do the math for me. How many licensees are we talking about if it's 20% who have yet to connect? About?
Our total is around 1,800. So, 360, I guess, is 20%.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Great. Well, thank you. Keep it up. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other questions on that. And now we're going to spend some time getting an update on the agency's work on social equity in licensing and elsewhere. And I'll ask Becky Smith, the licensing director, to start us off there. And not sure who all else is joining you, but I'll let you just handle that from here.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Postman and Board Member Hauge and Garrett. Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. I'd like to provide some updates on the work the agency has been undertaking for the past year or more. We have heard from the community members questions on what the agency is working on, questions on what the agency is able to accomplish by rule. Next slide. I'd like to briefly provide you with some highlights on the social equity program. The purpose of the program is to increase the number of cannabis retail licenses held by social equity applicants from disproportionately impacted areas. The legislature was very specific and limits LCB to reissue retail licenses that have been forfeited, revoked, canceled, or not previously issued. The LCB does not have the authority to increase the number of retail licenses for this program. I just have to say that again, that the LCB does not have the authority to reissue, to issue more licenses than those that have been, as I mentioned, forfeited, revoked, canceled, or previously issued. This must be done by the legislature. There are currently
Can I ask
39.
a quick clarifying question there? I'm sorry to interrupt so soon. We also, we don't have the authority to increase the number of retail licenses for social equity. Do we have the authority to increase the number of retail licenses beyond the ones you talked about for any other purpose?
We do not.
Right. Thank you.
We do not. Yeah. Actually, I want to say that it's the legislature was indicated that it reserved the right to issue more licenses. I think it's RCW 6950 336 that limits our authority. So we have 39 licenses available. It's not going to be less than, because I always hear that number fluctuate back and forth. It's 39 currently. That number could increase if licenses are canceled or revoked. 23 of those are in areas with bans or restrictions. 16 are potential viable locations. Next slide. So let's talk about the work the agency has been doing. The agency is committed to making social equity programs successful and has prioritized staff and resources to support the work of the agency. My staff have been attending all of the social equity task force meetings along with enforcement and policy staff. We've provided presentations and have staff dedicated to answer questions for the task force on LCB's regulatory authority and the cannabis licensing process. We still meet weekly with the task force staff to provide data and support to answer questions relating to the licensing process, for example. The information that we've received by attending the task force meetings and community feedback drove our action items. We've used the feedback from the task force meetings and the agency open forum to begin to understand the community's needs. For example, we've heard that there was a need for one place that the community could go to for information and updates. We also heard that there was a need for a review of our criminal history rules, as well as making changes, small changes, to how we share and display our data. Ollie?
Can you speak on our internal social equity task force and who or what it consists of?
Yes, I actually will.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely. So next slide, please. So in response to addressing the comments made by the community at social equity task force meetings, the agency created a cannabis social equity page. This is an external website that houses various resources and the opportunity for further engagement with the community. We have social equity program overview, licensing resources, so what makes up a business structure, local requirements, location restrictions, for instance. And within the LCB Cannabis Social Equity page, there's also a section that provides allowances to anyone to submit questions. We haven't had a lot of questions that have been submitted, but we know as time goes on that we'll see more questions added there. And then we want to be able to have a spot that we actually will have frequently asked questions as well. There's also other resources on that page that talks about our agency partners, laws and rules, etc. Russ?
I really appreciate this, getting this out into the open. Can you, am I coming through?
You are.
Okay, good. At any rate, what is the standard that you've imposed for responding to these questions in terms of time?
Great question, Russ. So actually, we respond to them within 24 hours. We actually have staff that are dedicated to looking at what questions come in and then us responding right away. Next slide. So we've also made changes in our criminal history. So in November of 2020, in preparation for social equity licenses to be issued, licensing started to reevaluate the criminal history rules and process. Soon after, we collaborated with policy and rules team, started those rules to later be revised with an effective date of October 2nd, 2021. Some of the focuses were easing conviction allowances and time considered, removing the requirement for an individual to disclose past offenses since we run the check and obtain the history without putting the burden on the applicant. Sometimes we ask for all their criminal history. Sometimes that's 30 years past and folks don't always remember everything that might be on their criminal history, and we certainly didn't want to give somebody a hit for that. We're never trying to do a gotcha. We also included our internal review process in consideration so an applicant is not discouraged from applying. We revised the rules. We shared with a few of the members on the task force as well to receive their input. And then once the rules were implemented, we trained our staff, we trained enforcement staff. We were able to help them understand the why this was necessary. Next slide. And then our licensing process. So if staff heard from the community and listened to the task force meetings, our goal is to take the feedback and evaluate our current application process as well. Through intentional dialogue, we found ways to improve our application process and provide greater assistance to our applicants. We've done outreach to other states, who I'll talk about in a bit. We're evaluating our application process to allow more flexibility in identifying barriers, providing resources for an easier connection with our partner agencies as well, creating letters for applicants to assist with local jurisdictions or property owners when the licensing process begins. We saw that as a barrier when we began issuing licenses way back in 2014. They need a letter from LCB saying that they're working with us. So we were creating that letter as well. And of course, we've begun planning outreach and education for potential applicants. We were very successful when we implemented I-502, going out and doing outreach and doing education to those applicants. Our plan is to do that again, also with our rules folks. Next slide. So state outreach. Licensing staff reached out to states that have implemented successfully social equity cannabis programs. So I want to say again, we reached out to states that have successfully implemented these programs. While we heard about many states like New York City, for instance, we thought it was important to speak with states who have issued the licenses. 23 questions were drafted for consistency in interviewing. This enabled us to compile a good overview and comparison of Colorado, Los Angeles County in California, and Massachusetts. Some of the questions addressed were the following, but again, we asked 23, so I'm just going to name a few. Identifying barriers they encountered, social equity criteria, if the requirements were validated, so did they require documentation, best practice around implementation, third-party review, did the agencies do their own review or did they hire a third-party vendor to do that review of who those social equity applicants were? Education and training. So at what point did they provide education and training, or did they provide it throughout the process? And then any legal challenges that they had in issuing licenses. Next slide. Next slide, please. So what else have we done? Outreach to jurisdictions with open allotments. This has that have a ban or moratorium. So we contacted all jurisdictions with open allotments that have a ban or moratorium to provide information on social equity program and the licensing process. If you remember, we shared this in an open forum on May 25th of 2021. But since then, licensing has gone back and contacted all the jurisdictions with potential viable allotments for social equity applicants to gather information and resources on jurisdictions that assist the applicant in their process. So we looked at establishing points of contact. So who could a licensee contact if they needed to reach out to, let's say, the city of Tacoma? Who could we contact if we needed to reach out to the city of Tacoma? Geographic research, so zoning, 1,000-foot buffer, to better understand the location availability. We want an applicant for social equity to be able to know where they might be able to locate their business versus having to do this complete search that takes maybe a year, 90 days, I mean, a long time to find a location. And then information for permitting your zoning. So that's also that's on our website. It shows you where businesses can locate. We also met with the association, so AWC, sorry, Association of Washington Cities. We reviewed their survey. We contacted the cities that responded with interest or potential interest in hosting a social equity license. Since our agency's reaching out, we've seen changes to Clark County, Everett, both increased their cap. That we've also met with the city of Ridgefield and Black Diamond, but have not yet seen any changes in their permitting, although we're always hopeful we're going to see more changes as more education for these local jurisdictions happen. Next slide. So why is rulemaking necessary? LCB cannot legally issue a social equity license without first adopting rules necessary to implement the program. State law requires further definition and rule to be implemented. The rulemaking project team began meeting in mid-October, then regularly bi-weekly discussions. It includes rulemaking, licensing, and enforcement staff, as well as other staff. We're considering new rules and changes that may need to happen in rule. So rulemaking process, the CR 101 was filed October 27th, 2021, and next steps would be a listen and learn and seek community input. The first listen and learn is scheduled for February 28th, 2022. That the CR 102 to the board should be filed in April or presented to the board for their approval in April. We'll be posting all of the listen and learn dates and times and next steps. I have Kathy Hoffman online for further questions after the presentation come up, and she's done a fabulous job, and as always, in leading our rules for social equity. Next slide. So Ollie asked about our agency work group. We recognize that the whole agency has a role in creating successful social equity program. The LCB developed an internal work group that has representatives from each division throughout our agency to prepare us to accept social equity applications. This helps us clearly identify and communicate the work to be done, who's responsible, and the next steps for our goals. We meet every month. We'll begin meeting every 2 weeks as necessary. We found this very successful when we issued I-502 applications to be able to meet and understand what each other's work is, and then what the work of the agency is, of course, moving forward. We also continue to work to do preparation so what are the next steps? So Kathy Hoffman and Caitlin, I invite you guys to, if you have any information that you want to share or add to the presentation, and then of course open it up for questions.
Just give them a chance to see if they want to add. There's Ms. Hoffman.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't have anything to add. I really want to commend Becky and licensing for the great work that they've done on this project since the beginning. And it's really coordinated well with rulemaking and moving into the future with these rules. So we're making great progress, and we really appreciate the collaboration across the agency. Thank you.
Anything to add, Ms. Bamba?
Nope, I don't have anything to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have one. I'm not sure who would be. Oh, I'm sorry, Ollie, you had your hand up there.
No, I was just going to follow suit with Kathy and commend Becky and the agency for the work they've done and continue to do, and to say it's been really great to see how we've been eager to come together beforehand and do all of the work that you described here to be ready for the task force and for recommendation, and to also state that everything that you've presented here has been communicated to the entire task force work group in various meetings. So this work has not been done in a tunnel. On all of our meetings with the entire task force, this work has been presented. You've done presentations. When we first did the website, we had, I think, 10 to 15 minutes on the agenda with the entire task force to present the website and things. So thank you.
Member Hauge?
Thank you. I just want to give my perspective of working 25, 30 years in government policy making and policy execution. The progress that this team has put together and made coordinating the complexities of rulemaking with the public process that is the legislative task force is not something I've seen before. And I am very, very sad to not be able to continue to be part of this project. This is some outstanding work, and again, I wish the best to the agency and to you all going forward with this.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I will certainly second the comments of my fellow board members. And I had a quick question, at least, on the rulemaking piece. Obviously, we do rulemaking all the time, and it's almost always for people who are already in the system, right? They're people who we do regulate. What are we going to do? And you and I have talked about this a little bit, but what are we going to do that extra bit of outreach now and to make sure that process is easily accessible and understandable to people who aren't already inside the world that you live in?
That is a great question, Chair Postman, and I'm happy that you asked it because a little bit later today, meeting with members of my team and our DEI manager to talk about putting together some sessions to invite community to meet with us and talk about how we do rules and the different ways that community can engage with us in rule development, the ways that they can engage with the agency in learning about that. So I anticipate at this point that those kinds of efforts will probably start to take shape by the end of this month. And the idea is to offer those sessions virtually to begin with. If we're in a space by mid-February that we can do those live, we're absolutely going to try to do it. I know I'm being a little bit, optimistic there, but why not? And at the same time, I do want to do a recording that we can share with, across our authorizing environment, right? That people can access anytime they want to find out, how do you get involved with rulemaking? Who do I talk to? How does the process work? All those sorts of things. And it really is geared to folks who are not our licensees at this point, but our future licensees. Right. So I'm glad you asked that. It's work I'm very excited to do.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And frankly, it could be helpful for people who already are licensees but don't have the comfort level to come before you all themselves, and you don't have to have a lawyer or a lobbyist or anything to do that. And so, yeah, good. I look forward to that. Yeah, another question? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to follow up on that to say, in the beginning, probably the first month of COVID, and that was when we did our across the state outreach, and that outreach was for people that wasn't in the industry, that felt like they were left out of the industry, wanted to get into the industry. So those 3 across the state meetings, David, that was the group, the community that we were that we brought in, and it was well attended. And these weren't licensees. These were folks that was interested in getting into the industry. These were people that had medical dispensaries and felt like that they got left out, or wanting to know going forward how they would be able to get into the industry if we created new opportunities. So I don't recall where we get our listserv from and what we did for that. But those 3 meetings that was statewide meetings was well attended by others that was not already in the industry.
Yeah, good. Okay. Any other questions for anybody here or anything further to add on from staff on this subject before we move to the next? If not,
I just want to thank you. I want to thank the board, Ollie, that Russ, David. I just thank you for all of your support. That we have a lot more work to do, but I think it's always comforting for staff and myself to know that we have the support of the board, and it makes a huge difference. So thank you.
you bet, 100%. Yep, really appreciate all that you and your team and everybody is doing on this, and it's not easy. And we're not done. So yeah, thank you for that. I think we're going to stay with you for a general licensing update.
Yes. So
Great.
I'll make it brief because you've probably heard enough from me already. So
Please.
I wanted to, I'll just highlight a couple of things. And the first, of course, is 1480, that as we're accepting applications, we began accepting applications on 12/2. Again, this is extending certain liquor COVID allowances. That we have 3 new temporary endorsements: the curbside delivery, cocktails to go, and growler delivery. I don't know why I can't say that. We estimate about 10,000 licensees are eligible to apply. So far, we've had 122 factory sealed curbside for takeout, 93 pre-mixed cocktails that have been approved, 61 for growlers, and then we have 25 applications that have been denied due to the licensees requesting a third-party delivery that was non-compliant with a non-compliant company. So we also have on the 8th the new food service outdoor that'll be shared tasting area requirements are planned to be effective. So they went into effect. That the team has expanded our online resources to include information about food requirements and outdoor seating. A big thank you to communications for all your assistance. They were wonderful in helping us get this information out. So Cannabis, as you remember, we did some simple alterations since October 1st when customer service took over. Simple alterations for the Cannabis unit. We've completed 18 applications with an average processing time of 10 days. So it's gone from 90 days to 10 days for simple alterations. That we have in December, we took the alterations application, we combined it into just one application. That way it provided our customer service with the ability to know if it went quickly to customer service or if it needed to be a larger, more intense application or investigation and needed to go to our Cannabis unit. And then that on that same note, we've also had some questions around the ability to be able to do our selling of a cannabis license or cannabis business and a change of location. We've never been able to do that. That we have some limitations in our, in the application or in our system that allows that. But we were piloting. We're piloting an applicant right now to see if there's a way for us to do that without having to make huge changes in our system or wait for S&P. So again, we're trying to make some changes, some quick changes that make sense for our licensees, for our staff as well. And then last but not least, I think it's important to mention that the sports and entertainment facilities pilot program. So licensing and enforcement, and big thank you to Nicola Reed. She's done a fantastic job as always. But we met with Blade and Timber to check on the pilot program. This opens our communication, gives us the ability to let licensees know how they're doing so far. It also provides us with some feedback from them, so they get to tell us what information that they would like we want to hear from them about ways that we can do better, if we can provide more communication, if we can provide more information, and then it just provides us with the licensee's perspective. We also don't want to have any surprises when it comes to the end of the pilot. We want everybody to be on the same page and know ahead of time if there's concerns. So we both have enforcement staff joins us on those phone calls. As I mentioned most recently, Chandra and her staff joined me and my staff for Blade and Timber, and we have the University of Washington that we're meeting on Friday. So a big thank you to everyone, but you can expect to hear more. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Great. I'm sure we will. Question from Member Hauge.
Yes.
Oh, muted.
Sorry, addressing the joint transfer of a location and a cannabis license. Is that for retail and processing, or for all licenses then?
All licenses, yes.
Okay.
So right now we're just piloting one because we want to know what are their concerns with our system. Is it Department of License or Department? I'm just trying to think of what that's called. Department of Revenue and their business licensing speaking to our license. So we just want to make sure what are the issues and see if we can maybe push some things through that make sense to do. Because we have a lot of these and they usually have to do one first and then the other. They have to do the assumption and then they have to make the move. And sometimes we hear from our licensees that that's a huge issue.
Yeah, and I can understand that, having advised small businesses before. Anything that adds to the transaction cost can be crippling. And I guess I just would hate to leave the impression that we're going to wait until the implementation of SMP to try to address this issue and facilitate this process, because SMP has been going on since I've pretty much been on the board, I think. So I don't want to leave the impression, please, that this is going to be a problem that will take years to solve.
Yeah, so it's a great question too, Russ, because that's one of the things that we had thought early on was that we'll wait until SMP, but as that was extended, there was that need that I started getting phone calls again from folks saying, Becky, what can we do? We saw this change in alterations. Is there a possibility for us to have to work this out? And I have a licensee that's going to volunteer to pilot it. So we're going to pilot it and figure out what the bugs are.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all that. I'm glad to hear about the alterations process too. To some, that might seem like a small thing, but as Member Hauge was talking about the impacts on small business, it's a big deal. It's something that the board just sort of wondered about, and you and your staff were able to make that happen. And it just shows how we can work together with our stakeholders, with our licensees to evolve, modernize, streamline constantly. That's what we're always doing, trying to find those places. So absolutely. Thanks for showing how that works. Appreciate it. Thanks for all that update. We will now hear from the Director of Enforcement and Education. There she is, Chandra Brady. I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Board Member Hauge, Garrett, and Board Chair Postman. As always, I'll be informing you about the specific goings-on in the Enforcement Division, and I invite you to tell me if there's other things you'd like to see. You'll see adjustments that I'm making along the way based on your feedback, and we're always willing to make more. So thank you very much for that input. First slide, Dustin. Next slide. Awesome. We'll start with support and education because that's where we try to start whenever possible. You can see that the number of educational contacts that we've done in each of the industry units just continues to be impressive. You'll notice on these particular slides that I asked for some comparison numbers so we can look at some year-end summaries as we go along. So if you look at total number of hours in the green on the bottom, we're looking at over 4,500 hours for the year, and that's impressive work. We've been looking at doing as much education as we can when people are, when licensees are showing us their intent to be in compliance, and that's been a really positive approach, and as you can see, been really successful in us getting out there and giving education to our licensees. Next slide. Again, I'm just providing you a little glance at what those categories end up being when we're out. Having gone on ride-alongs, some of you, and you know that I get out there and do ride-alongs, I see that every time we have contact, there's a relationship built, and it's almost like the licensees and their employees. I see a lot more of the employees asking questions. They have kind of a list of questions they'd like to ask when the LCB officer arrives. So a lot of these categories, yes, are things that our officers initiate, but also they're questions that our licensees bring up and approach us with when we enter the establishment, which is a really positive way to do business. You can see that we had over 8,000 events, contacts involving COVID education last year. So there's no secret that that had a large impact on the work all of us are doing, but especially our officers that are out in the field. Thank you, Dustin. When we look at complaints for the month of December, we had 351. As you know, a large number of those are related to COVID, and 74% of them were related to COVID in December. There were 18 complaints against the cannabis industry, 313 in liquor, and 20 in tobacco and vapor. Again, you can look down below at the 2021 totals if you're interested in a year-end total, and you can see that if we're looking at the total number of complaints, liquor is over 5,000, cannabis is at just a little over 300, and tobacco and vapor at 430, just to give you some comparison there for the month of December to the entire year. Thanks, Dustin. We had 11 non-COVID complaints in the cannabis industry. Next, we had 62 for liquor. I go ahead and I show you a good year and a half of data there just so we can see together if there are any anomalies, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on them. And then next, of course, for tobacco and vape, we had 18 in December, and it looks like that's a pretty low, if not average number for that industry. And then just to look at the COVID-19 complaints in total, you can see that we received a total of 266 complaints related to COVID, which was 74% of our total complaints. And we covered that on another slide, but it's interesting. You can also see some of the regulation changes in our world that we were experiencing mapped out here in COVID complaints and industry complaints. So some of this we found out is related directly to our public not having a really clear understanding of the changes in regulations as we went through. So it took some time for that information obstacle to catch up. Thank you, Dustin. Sorry. And then, of course, AVNs issued, which is always a really popular point of discussion. In December, there were 80. And I would just say, as we talked about, you can see that the restarting of compliance checks and getting out there and being able to get out there in a safe manner for our officers and for the industry, you can see that that impacted those numbers of AVNs. Again, if you want to look at December, liquor received 63, 12 in tobacco and vapor, and 5 in cannabis, and their year-end totals are also there for you for comparison. One of the interesting notes here, sorry, Dustin, I had to take a breath. I know you're doing a great job. Is that 9% of our businesses had repeat violations, and typically we see numbers below 5%, but COVID really impacted that. And we've discussed that before, how folks in those areas where folks have decided they're not going to seek compliance for those particular regulations, we know we're going to get repeat incidents. So that's the impact of that number. Thanks, Dustin. And this is one of the slides we changed. You were looking for some different comparison data. So you'll see on the gray data, you're getting a 90-day running total for how we resolved alternatively violations in the liquor industry. So 82 of them were uncontested, signed, admitted, paid in the last 90 days, and then 31. Again, these are abnormally high numbers because it's a restart and a re-education and starting over with accountability again, really in the area of compliance. 2 went straight to formal hearing. We did informal hearings for 27 of them, and 1 of those was forwarded to a formal hearing after an informal hearing. And again, that's just liquor. If we move forward into cannabis, you can see we had 1 that was uncontested paid, 1 that went straight to formal hearing, and 4 that were resolved at informal hearings. And then again, that gray piece of data is the 90-day running total. And again, if there's a different comparable, if that just isn't feeling quite right and there's a different comparable you'd like to see, let me know, because we've probably got it. And then when we just look at alternative dispute resolution as a whole, obviously we want to work with our licensees to gain compliance. And even at the point where there was some accountability measure in these public safety arenas, our goal is to settle these cases. So you can see that out of 31 informal hearings that were conducted, 96% of them were settled. Next slide. On to compliance checks. Out of 253 compliance checks in December, 80% of those we found folks to be in compliance with youth access, which means 20% of the time we were able to complete a sale. You'll see that pre-COVID, we were at 85%. And our industries are really engaged in this data and information and actually requesting conversation and really actively engaging in solution discussions, which is really positive. It's not really something I used to see from the old pool of folks I dealt with at the OPD. So that's awesome. Our arrestees really never came to us at OPD and asked us for feedback on how to do better. So it's a really great change in this market. You'll notice that I'm still noting, just as comment at the bottom, delivery compliance checks. And that's just because we're just starting to learn how to do them best. And it's all new data and it's very small amounts of data. So at any time I start to put that together and say, oh, we're at this rate, then it has a pretty large impact on folks. And I'd just like us to all be learning about this together. So right now in December, we did 21 checks, had 8 sales, and it was a 68% compliance rate. I will say that the last set of checks we did, my numbers aren't going to be 100% accurate because I didn't write them down, but I think we did 8 attempts and had 0 sales. So if that's any indication, then we're on the uptick, right? Next slide. Cannabis compliance checks. I have to say, I haven't seen this before, but I haven't been here as long as the rest of you, but we did 23 checks and had 100% compliance rate. So certainly compliments to the cannabis industry on those numbers.
Good, great to see.
Yeah, overall for 2021, the compliance rate there was 93%. Tobacco and vapor is at 77% out of 56 compliance checks and a 72% rate overall for 2021. So work still to do, and we will continue doing that work with our industries. Next slide. Over 2,500 compliance checks in December, and for a comparison, over 30,000 in 2021. That's a lot of work for our folks out there doing just for premise checks at over 18,000 licensed locations. Next slide. Cannabis premise checks were at 400 premises. Apparently that's a hard word for me today. We're over 400 in December with over 3,900 contacts, premise checks for the year at over 1,800. Like Director Morgan told you earlier, licensed locations. And then finally, at tobacco vapor premises, we were at 332 locations with over 4,400 for the year at over 6,300 licensed locations. That's a lot of contacts. That's a lot of information and education with our licensees. And then I don't always present this slide, but it's another glance for me at how the regulations have changed as it pertains to COVID. The top line is how much time our officers are spending administratively, which means finding ways to do their work without going into the field or entering documentation of their work or phone calls or those sorts of things. And then the green line with the gray boxes on the bottom is our field hours. And so you can see where we start to be, and you know, it intersects there with the increase in compliance checks where we start to get out in the field more, and then, oh, the regulations change again. So I could probably map out mandates and regulation changes by looking at some of the data we review for enforcement, which is interesting to me. And then finally, I won't read this to you. It's a lot of information. I will email it to you separately. It is just a year in review for education and enforcement. They've done a yeoman's amount of work and done a great job making changes and continuing to engage with the industry and the agency in a positive way. So if you don't have any questions for me, that's all.
I'll see if others do. I've got a quick one or two for you. We'll have one related to CCRS. Now that the your education folks are going to start working with licensees who have yet to plug in. Is that underway? Do you have any sense yet of what people are saying? I'm particularly curious if we're going to see a theme from what people say about why they are part of the 20%.
I don't have a feel on that theme yet, but that is what we are doing. We have created a plan that identifies that we will be moving into a phase once the project ends. We'll move into a phase where we really focus our education efforts on folks that haven't yet engaged with the system, and we're going to be very open about how we will progress from there. We will identify a timeline and identify what the minimum expectations are, just re-identify, and we'll communicate that likely 3 times prior to moving past that education stage. So right now we're just in the process of putting that in writing.
Yeah, and I you know, that timeline you'll be informed about how to do that, I would say, when you get out there and do this educational work, hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
How much trouble they're having, what is it, how can we help? Yeah.
Right now, the issue is that we're not hearing from them. So once we engage and hear from them, we'll have a better idea of what the obstacles are and what role, if any, we have in helping to mitigate those obstacles.
Okay, great.
You said you had a second question. Maybe that was too
pause for others if they had. No, the only thing I would say is, you know, when you look at the year-end numbers that you just gave us, and we see how these things have gone up and down. I think you know this, but just to say, the board really understands the work that your team on education and enforcement do, how hard that has been. We see the enforcement reports where they get harassed and hassled and other things. Others where, you know, we do the ride along and we see how they're welcomed in as really helpful guides to the process and all of that. Yeah, so just know the board is really appreciative of the work that the team does on enforcement and education, and we know how tough not just this year but last year was as well. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
Better 22.
Yeah, I would. When you say helpful guides, I have to say that one of the most powerful experiences for me in the field, there have been a lot of them, but this last month has been, I met some really friendly folks in one of our cannabis retail licensees, and they spent, probably a good 35 minutes. And I just got to ask stupid questions about cannabis and the product, and it was fun, and they had a great time, and it was fun for them, and it was fun for me. So I
had the same experience.
Yeah,
I learned about things like sugar crystal.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was great. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate the report.
Awesome. Thank you all.
See you next time. And we'll move to communications update with Communications Director Brian Smith. There you are, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Postman, members Hauge and Garrett. I don't have a presentation like the 2 excellent ones we just saw, but I'll be a little bit more informal and brief. Some highlights on the media front. Nothing much has changed since the updates that I've given you in the last couple of months, where we're down to maybe 1 or 2 press calls a day, which is very slow for us, as you know, but a lot compared to most other places, because the interest is always around the work that we do, and there's a lot of things that we can touch on. But there are 2 significant ones that I wanted to bring to your attention. Chair Postman knows that he and I and Director Garza and Policy and External Affairs Director Justin Nordhorn spent a good hour with the Associated Press last week talking about our legislation and the issues that we are seeing with the hemp-derived CBD and synthetically created cannabinoids. And so following that, Justin and I spent some time with the Spokesman Review, who called us with some similar issues. His story from the Spokesman Review came out today, fairly significant. I encourage you to go out there and take a look at that. I have not seen the one that's coming, or we anticipate that's coming from the Associated Press. I'll tell you that from the Spokesman Review, I think it's about what you would expect from a news article that touches different points of view within the industry as well as our own. I think we got some of our important points across, and he talked to some others that are out there in the industry. And so we'll see if the AP is going to be able to get their story out. It would be timely, I think, with our legislative hearings starting tomorrow in the House. So of course, that's always going to be posted in the news clips, and I'll make that available to you when it comes out, and you can take a look. Just moving on to general types of communications. I think it's important. I just made a note here about the projects. I'm not going to get into too much details because you hear from people like Jim and others about the work that we're doing on our projects, but just know that we're always heavily involved, and that's a regular part of our work. I'm not going to get into the details of all we have to do, but like Jim was right. When we're trying to reach our licensees, we try and hit them in a variety of different formats, not just shoot them an email. And he talked about a number of those ways to be able to reach folks. And it's challenging to get everybody to always be able to act, but we try and be as proactive as we can there. I know that was going on. Second, publications. Since we last met, we released the Fiscal 21 annual report. And that's a work that a lot of the divisions do. It's a very collaborative process, of which we also play a role in laying it out and writing a lot of the original content. Legislative Affairs Director Chris Thompson shared that with certain select legislative committees and staff, which is part of the outreach process on that. Interestingly, we heard from a committee chair who got back to us, who read it right off the bat, which was quite positive thing, and had a suggestion about adding more information about where the cannabis dollars go, and that is, and how it's used. That's something that we used to have in the annual report, but we made a decision a few years ago not to do that, because it's out, a lot of that money is outside of our business. It's allocated to other agencies to carry out, but we did recognize that there is interest in that. And so we followed through. And so since we told you guys that, the annual report is out, we've added an appendix, and we appended that to the end of the annual report and let the legislator know. And I think satisfied her that information is now part of this year's annual report, and we'll continue to include it, I think, in annual reports to come each year.
Good. Yeah, thanks for doing that so quick. I think that's terrific.
Yeah, good. Thank you. We're excited to roll out our new platform for the cannabis and alcohol newsletters beginning next week. If you remember, we jumped one issue, which was the fall issue, because we were decommissioning the tool that the agency used to roll out that newsletter. It was created for a different purpose, but we used the newsletter function of it to work. But we dropped that whole software system, and we transitioned to Medium, which is a communication tool that the Governor Inslee and certain agencies use also. And it's going to be, it gives us some flexibility, and we can use it in a real kind of a graphic format, using photos better and layout better and stuff. And so we're going to be rolling that issue out next week to cannabis licensees and stakeholders. And so we're excited to get that process started. And then as part of that, we had not gone public yet with our first video that we shared with you guys several months ago about the rulemaking process and then how that whole thing works. We were saving that for the rollout of this set of videos. And so that'll be part of this upcoming newsletter, is releasing that video. But it'll also start the time clock for creating additional additional videos that we want to do about every quarter. We met this morning with Tom Dixon, Captain Dixon from the enforcement unit, to consider doing one around third-party alcohol delivery. And it's an issue that we've seen more and more about, concern among not only the non-licensed third-party delivery people, but the impact it has on the original licensee who would be responsible for whatever happens with that third-party delivery service, right? And so it's a growing need, and we intend to go forward with something along those lines in a springtime issue. And then just lastly, and a couple of things, legislative stuff this time of year always generates a lot of media about other people's bills, not only ours, you know, as they get introduced. Some of the more dramatic ones are the ones that go up and never go anywhere, right? But they generate media interest, and they want to get our reaction to a lot of these things. I haven't really had much of anything yet, but I anticipate that that's coming. But I am involved with, communications is involved with our team and our legislative package and how we communicate that with legislators and through the media. So I'm part of that team and glad to be part of it. And then just lastly, just looking ahead on social equity and what Becky was talking about and all the work that you've done, I'm really looking forward to being a full partner on all the communications that's going to be necessary with you and Becky's team and the agency's work on SMP in the coming year. We know that there's going to be an awful lot of need on that front, but know that I'm on it and I'm ready and looking forward to be as proactive as we can to get out the information that people are craving, I think, on this topic.
That's great.
So that's it, unless you have any questions.
None for me. Looks like not. Thank you. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Move to a general agency update with our Deputy Director, Tony Hood, and an update on the SMP, which I don't think you're going to tell Member Hauge it'll be done by the time he's done, but.
No, unfortunately, no, it won't be. Good afternoon, Chair Postman and Members Hauge and Garrett. Thank you for allowing me to give you a quick presentation. I know we're getting close on time. Earlier today, we had a great DEI presentation. I know that some of you were there. Jim Weatherly, our DEI manager, did a great job, and I was very happy to see that we had about 236 participants. This was a meeting that was not mandatory, so you have all of those people interested in attending on their own. It was also recorded for anyone who had a conflict or wasn't here today so they could watch it. I was very happy to see all the interaction at the end of it during the question and answer. Several people made comments, they thanked Jim, and they had some questions, and it really shows that we have the opportunity to have a great dialogue and grow in that area. So, and Jim really did a great job.
He did. I would just say I sat in the whole thing, and one, it was nice to see how many people stayed on for the most of the hour. Jim was fantastic. I just think he really did a nice job telling people first who he is, what his story is, where he comes from, and it just sort of set the stage for people to engage. And as he said, and we all know, it's never ending work. That's part of it. And he was clear about that. But yeah, I thought it was a great launch of that. Yeah, thanks for your part in getting that ready too, Tony. It was really good.
Yeah, I agree. The way he was willing to be vulnerable with 236 people is great, and it sets the stage for us to be willing to talk about tough issues. So I hope that our staff know that you can truly reach out to him because he is like that on and off camera. He's really like that. So he's very approachable. Regarding headquarters and our regular operations work, we have still have the majority of non-enforcement staff working 100% from home. We have some staff who are required on a short time basis to come in for certain items in the headquarters. Certain licensing staff and finance staff have to come in during certain days. We're all being safe here in the office. We're masking up and social distancing, and everyone is really cooperating with our new requirements. We all survived the snow. I wasn't here most of the time in the headquarters building, but I was here a little bit, and I thought they did a great job maintaining everything. So that was nice to see. Regarding our systems modernization project, we are in the readiness phase right now. I am the executive sponsor of SMP right now. I am working closely with some people from licensing and IT to work on all of our readiness requirements. That includes preparing several RFPs. It also includes determining when we're going to hire contractors based on our current open existing contracts. For example, for OCM or for third-party QA. So we need our change management personnel, and we need to have our quality assurance personnel. And we have some very good open contracts that we may be able to use for those. Obviously, you guys know doing RFPs is very time consuming. And so if we have other avenues to get this accomplished, we will look at those. But the main focus is to make sure we have the right people hired and on board for this next iteration of the project. I have spent I've been here for 6 months, and I've gotten a lot of feedback about lessons learned, about people and personalities and methodologies that people thought were successful, and ones that weren't so successful in the past. We are going through a long list of lessons learned right now. We have from when the last project ended, they closed down and there was OCM reports, and there were a lot of recommendations from the project manager and OCM personnel about things you could do better. And so we are going through those lessons learned now, and we are coming up with solutions for those. How can we address that? How can we do this different in the future? And so Glenda is great about cataloging all of this and being very disciplined so that we can tell the OCIO that we have addressed the problems that have been identified. And so that's very important as we continue to work with the gated financing system. Member Garrett, did you have a question? Sorry, did I ask?
Sorry, I put some candy in my mouth at the same time. Do we work with OMWBE or do anything internal of tracking our contracting and whether and our percentage of contracting with women, minority-owned businesses and state-certified firms, and what that spend looks like?
Well, apart from the SMP project, I know that Matt Hansen and his team does a lot of tracking regarding that. And so regarding all of our contracts, they track that and they report back when, I don't know if it's annually or biannually that they report back to that agency.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, certainly. And I can follow up with more details if you'd like at the next EMT. And that's really all I have for SMP. But we really need to put resources into that to make sure we're ready to kick off the project once the budget authorizes all of the money, hopefully, knock on wood. The last thing I have is that we are finalizing the refresh of the strategic plan. We just have some small edits. Edmund has done a great job of finalizing that with all the comments that were given, and then we'll be able to publish. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll just say on SMP at the steering committee meeting we had the other day, it was just nice to see people's openness to talk about lessons learned. You know, this has been around for a while, but this is a fresh start. The governor has put in the budget request that we feel we need at this point. We hope we get that. And it just feels different, and the conversation is different around it. So knocking on wood, but I think we're doing well right now.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely need to continue to have open conversations, lots of transparency, so that we can be successful.
Yeah, a lot is learned in that bumpy ride, and we should, you know, take advantage of that now. So
absolutely.
we can do it. Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate your updates. And we'll now turn to the agency director, Rick Garza, for his comments.
Chair Postman, board members Garrett and Hauge, good afternoon. Thanks for having us join you. You know, when you work with the best staff and employees in state government, it sounds repetitive, right? So I'm going to be very brief. Great updates from the divisions. I just continue to see great information shared with our board and with other staff here, and then obviously with the public. This has already been said. Ollie and Becky, you know, continue to do great work with respect to our social equity program, and you hear how it's all kind of aligning with different divisions and communications. I was at the, of course, we don't have a lot of agency webinars, by the way, folks. We just don't as an agency, but we felt, given Jim's been with us since the middle of October, Jim Weatherly, that we wanted to make sure that people understood, because Jim was going to other divisions and they were asking questions. I know recently Jim was in the licensing division, and they were asking questions about the program. Who is Jim? What's it all about? What are we doing? What are our action plans? Where are we going with this program? And so, as Tony said, I obviously pleasantly surprised to see, you know, 2/3 of our employees present and staying on. And, you know, if you didn't get to hear it, you want to go back and hear the recording, because Jim is just a great pickup. So that's just, you know, I've had that experience. Tony and I, Anita, have been working with him since he came here, but wow, just really rocked today. And I think that's why everybody stayed, because his story was not just our story, his story, where he came from. And it's just kind of inspiring. And I just know, because of the questions, we went over by 15 minutes and people stayed. So just that went as well as I could have thought it could go. And it's just a testament to the fact that Jim's going to just be a great resource and a great leader in this program. And so really, really appreciate what happened there today.
Pause 1 second. I think Member Garrett's got a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ollie, I didn't see it.
That's okay. I was going to say, so does that make it worth it that we took our time and went through several interview processes and extended to make sure we were getting the right person? Because I know it was a little painful.
You know, Becky, our licensing director, was it yesterday or today? Becky, you know, we, like everyone, not just in business or private sector, but in public sector, we're having troubles recruiting. You know, it's happening everywhere. It's happening with us. And Becky made that mention that, remember, we had to wait to get the right person for DEI. And you're right, Ollie, thank goodness we were careful and decided that, you know, we're going to start this process over again, because we're just not satisfied with what we've seen. And that's how we got Jim. So you're right. You're absolutely right, Ollie. You know, that's a testament to everybody that's out there trying to recruit. We got to up our recruitment efforts, just like everybody does, to get people here. But let's make sure we make the right choice. And Becky just talked about that. OMWB, Ollie, you just talked about that. What I'd like to do is ask Jim and Matt, who is our risk manager, to come and talk about where we are with that contracting piece of it. Because OMWE obviously gives us a report every year of how we're doing. And then I know that Jim and Matt and others are looking at those to up our numbers, just like I know, because we get awards for it, but our vet population is huge, the number of vets that we have in our agency. But we'll bring that back to you, Ollie, as another piece that Jim can bring back at our next EMP, just to kind of share with you the report that Lisa sends to us, the director there, of how we're doing and then efforts that Matt and Jim have taken to increase those numbers. So, you know, thanks for bringing that up, and we'll keep note of it and we'll bring it back to you again.
And also take a look, make sure our agency take a look at that new, the rescinding of the executive order that the governor did last week, and then the new executive order that's being put out.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look at that, Ollie. And that's all I have for this afternoon. If you didn't see Jim Weatherly's employee spotlight that was done on our intranet site, you got to go see it. It's really kind of cool, and explains why we had such another good day with him today with our agency. So I'll stop there if there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any questions, and we'll just pause, see if there's any other updates from your team that we didn't hear or anything that was missed. Not seeing any hands shooting up, so just see if board members have any final questions or comments. And not, we shall adjourn the executive management team meeting for January 12th. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.